to ask you a question
Dynamite.
from the prophetic. Um, a couple of years ago, the Lord told me about a particular world leader that was about to start meeting with Donald J. Trump, and it hadn't happened yet. This was about 3 months prior. And he told me that he had visited this world leader in person and said, either you change or you're a dead man. And so a year had gone by a little bit longer. And I asked the Lord, I said, why is this person still living, even though he had changed a lot of his ways? And the Lord just responded back to me and said, you sure he's living? So, when we look at that casket, I'm assuming that we all have seen the same individual because there was no mourning across the nation. My question is that the one in the casket or someone else that's a duplicate? Or how long has that individual actually, um, you know, his life been removed from him? So those are the part of the intelligence and analysis that interest me from a prophetic standpoint of, what's going to happen. And then when the Lord tells you that, you scratch your head and start thinking, because a lot of these people have duplicates and others. So just a thought to pass along to you and the family that may have some similar questions.
Well, it's really interesting that you say that the way you said that, because the dream that I had was a 2-part dream, and there was a panel of doctors, and people were rolling in coffins on a gurney, and they were rolling them up to this panel, and the panel was saying COVID. And something was wrong, and I knew something was wrong. And so what I did, this boldness came over me. I ran up. It was almost like they were on like a stage, like a platform. And I ran up onto the stage where the doctors were, and I was popping open the coffins, and there was nobody in them. And I'm like, you're lying. This is not a death due to COVID. There's nobody in here. So that was the first scene. The second scene is I'm in the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. There's who many consider right now in the natural, the leader of the free world, is in a casket at the very front. And I have that same level of boldness come over me. I'm like, and my whole thought process is, can I beat the Secret Service? Can I run from where I am in the back of the National Cathedral down the front all the way and make it to the casket to pop the lid? Because if I can pop the lid, the whole world is going to see things are not as they seem. Either whoever's in the casket has been dead a lot longer than we think, or there's nobody in the casket, or it's somebody else that's in. I didn't know what the scenario was, but I knew that my job was to run as fast as I could up the center aisle of the National Cathedral, pop open the coffin, and once that happened, the exposure would be made, and the whole world would know that there's been a big deception perpetrated.
Interesting.
That was kind of my thinking on when the Lord tells you something like that, he already knows the truth. And we kind of scratch our head because we still look in the natural a lot of times. And he had mentioned to me at one time, someone on the Supreme Court that had passed, he asked me one night, he said, are you sure that's her? Because that person lived a long time with a lot of infirmities that would have naturally taken someone else out. So just there may be some that are in the family and others that look at that and believe it, but there is a lot of deception going on, and intelligence of the type that you're talking about, dreams, prophetic, that downloads that Amanda gets, or this is the hour, because truth will prevail over the lies.
Amen. The only difference with mine is that Barack Obama was celebrating at the head of the bed, waiting for the passing of this individual. I took the apricot candy away from them so they couldn't celebrate, and I ate it so they couldn't have it. Typical Italian. See, even in dreams, same thing. You know what I mean? My behavior. So it's, but that's confirmation. I mean, praise the Lord. That's how, confirmation works. And what I ended up doing, and we'll get to this, but yesterday I sent John the dream with the American Airlines. He asked me to specifically send it to him for this broadcast.
And then-
So I did.
You want to go ahead and read that dream for us?
Oh, sure. Hold on. Let me go to my sent folder because you're in there. I mean, I know it by heart, but you know, let me go here and see.
I'm excited about this dream.
Yeah, okay. Oh, no, that's the other one I sent you today. I forwarded you something that was interesting, but okay, so here was, for whatever reason, it's not coming up, but I did type it up for you and send it, but I do remember it. So I'm just going to tell you what it is. So the dream was, now the reason why I had this in a dream is because I was too sick for the Lord to prop me up a few days ago to keep me up during the night. So if he can't get it to me one way, he's going to give it to me another way. So he put me into really deep sleep and I had this dream. So basically, me and Dave were standing. We were sort of facing each other, okay? And we would look like we were on this concrete looking like launch pad runway sort of area. Dave was in his typical His Glory gray sweats and hat, okay, in the dream. And so the sky was unusually blue. There was no clouds whatsoever. And then to my right, there was a hedge of trees, a thick hedge of trees, tall ones. Suddenly comes over the trees and one single American Airlines plane, the bigger ones. And it's starting its ascend, basically, is what it's trying to do. It's obviously there's an airport that is nearby to this launch pad or whatever area we're at. The airport is nearby because the plane has just begun its climb. As the plane is beginning its climb, and I could clearly see American Airlines, it's like the Lord gave me supervision so I could, like, you know what I mean? See every detail on the plane to know it was American Airlines. It's said it on the plane as well. Excuse me. So what happens is, all of a sudden above our heads appears this enormous 30-foot plus tall dark green missile. So it's like almost like me and Dave are under the radar, you know, because the missile's above us by now. And there's no distinct marking, so it's not a US missile, because the US missiles have the American flag on it amongst other distinct markings. And this missile had none of those distinct markings, but it was dark green and it's hovering. And when this American Airlines plane begins its ascent, this missile begins to move up at a 90-degree angle to begin to go after it, because most missiles have GPS tracking in it. So it's just beginning its climb, the missile, and it probably was going to break left because the plane was going from my right to left is how the plane was climbing. And so when the missile began to go like this up in the air straight, I woke up. And I told Mr. Jim and Dave about it that day, this dream, because we did 2 Jarheads and a tulip. And so that was the dream.
It's a very profound dream with multiple references to really cool stuff. The first reference is there's a recurring dream that Abraham Lincoln had, where there's 2 versions of the dream. There's one that he was on a ship and there was another fast moving ship in front of him going to a distant shore. But one of the more common told story of this dream is that he was sitting on a cement dock and a fast moving ship came by. So April 14th, 1865, at his cabinet meeting in the morning, he looks at General Grant and says, "Did we hear from one of the other generals?" I forget who it was. And the Civil War had ended, I think, 3 or 4 days prior. And Grant looked at him like, "No, why would we hear from him? He's on his way back to Washington." And he looks over at the Secretary of the Navy and he says, "Well, actually, it's in your department. He goes, what's that? And he goes, I had a dream last night that I was standing on a dock and there was a fast moving ship that came by. He said, I had the same dream the night before Bull Run, Gettysburg, Fredericksburg, Antietam, and there were like 6 different battles. And so he said, so there's something that's going to happen today. He said, and Grant looked at him and he goes, sir, we didn't win all of those battles. And he goes, no, it wasn't about the victory. It was about an event of national importance. Of course, if you look up April 14th, 1865, the only thing that you can see that happened in history that overshadows everything is that was the night Lincoln was shot in Ford Theater.
Wow.
So the fact that you're on a cement platform and you're seeing a vehicle that carries a massive amount of people coming overhead gives it the warning of you're about to witness an event of national importance. And this relates back to, again, at least 6 different dreams that President Abraham Lincoln had some 170 odd years ago. So I think that's a really interesting part of the symbol.
When she asked us, and the thought that, and Dave and I were sitting, I don't know where we were. I think I was in the cottage. It was interesting that there were no markings on it, but it was dark green. And I told Tulip, I said, for me, not being a dream interpreter, but feeling prophetic, there are a lot of countries that could represent, because if it just had a red star on it, you would know that country, or if it had a crescent moon on it. But being that color, North Korea, China, Iran, there are many that have that color on their missiles, and they provided to Hezbollah and Hamas and others, that it was not one, but it was many, that it was representing a threat to this silver eagle that was flying in the air. So I don't know if that is any part of it, but that's the prophetic that I thought of. And I know American Airlines is complicit, but that silver and the colors of the nation, I thought were key for the jet, and then the missile representing multiple nations that threaten this nation.
Yeah, it's really a really interesting symbol. It's also interesting that you saw a large hedge of trees. You were facing Dave. So the fact that you were facing each other, I'm gonna guess you weren't 6 feet apart wearing masks.
No, not at all. We were pretty close, and it was kind of like almost like diagonal facing each other, kind of like this.
Right. That's
Yeah.
how I saw it. When you're facing somebody and you're talking to them, until last year, you stood a foot apart. You're not going to stand 3 feet back and talk to somebody. You're going to come up to them and you're going to be in their space. And so what to me this represents is the recovery of America. And it's literally America starting to climb. The American Airlines is really interesting because it represents the commercial capability, literally a commercial plane, but also the commercial and economic capability of the United States of America. And of course, it was named America and not United or anything else because it represents the comeback and the economic comeback, in particular, the commercial viable comeback of the country. A couple of the other symbols, you guys are face to face. This is talking about the end of the pandemic. This is talking about let's open the country, let's stop playing the game, let's stop with the propaganda, let's quit pretending like all of this is what it isn't, and let's open up the country and let's get back to commercial viability, all the businesses open, the movie theaters, the churches, let's get back to some semblance of what people would refer to as normal. Whether we go back to normal, or I don't even like the term new normal or whatever. The idea is that's where it's heading. So you're face to face, you're on this platform, which means you're about to see an event of national importance. There's a hedge of trees, which means there's a level of protection, at least on one side, which again, to me means a stay from the disease that's come against our country. Which is why I believe this is talking about the end of the pandemic. The skies are blue.
Very.
There was a phrase, and this came to mind, and I'm not sure why it came to mind. It could be one of the dreams that you sent me, Jim. But there was a phrase that represented unlimited visibility that George H.W. Bush used to say all the time. And he used to say it to his son. And both of the George Bushes, of course, were pilots. And they had it actually as a plaque at their home in Kennebunkport, Maine, where it's basically stood for unlimited visibility. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. I forget. It's like 4 letters. It's like NAVR, which is like no clouds, visibility, unlimited. I forget what the phrase is, but that's what, because you said the sky was blue. It was a deep blue. There were no clouds at all, which meant, and again, it's interesting that God reminded me that this symbol relates back to 2 other presidents. So again, it's emphasizing the idea that the dream is talking about an event of national importance. And what it is you're seeing this plane starting to climb, which is starting to get back up to a height of prominence, and in particular commercial prominence, and in particular commercial and economic viability. And basically there's nothing hindering it. There's no visibility, or there's no visibility problems. There's no fog, there's no clouds, there's no rain, there's no storm. It literally has the ability to climb as high as it wants to and go anywhere, except for the threat that could come against it. And again, because it's a commercial plane, because it's a major company, I believe it's talking in particular to the economic and commercial viability of the company, of the country. When you said a green, no other markings missile, I heard without any prompting at all and with no hesitation, the Green New Deal. And so what I'm hearing is, as the pandemic ends and there's a level of shelter and protection put around this country again, and we can talk about the theology of that if we want to, but there's a level of protection. People are close together. They're facing one another. They're not wearing masks. Social distancing has ended. The commercial viability of the country is about to come back. It could be completely torpedoed if we make bad economic policy decisions based on fear. If you're woke, if you understand the science behind, my dad's got a dual doctorate in biology and physics. He's Dr. Redenbaugh. He studied extensively every aspect of the pandemic. He sends me emails constantly to let me know what's really going on, what information is real, what information is not real, as is the case with most of you and probably, frankly, most of your audience. When you realize the economic hit that we took, the emotional hit that we took, the hit that we took related to suicide and depression, based on, at best, misinformation, and at worst, an all-out lie, the idea that there's another lie or another series of pieces of massive misinformation that could hinder and actually end the recovery of America is a very stark warning for governmental people in this country. This is a dream that every person in Congress, every US senator, every governor, everybody in a position to create economic policy, every attorney general, I think of the great attorney general of the state of Texas, who is fighting the Biden administration, particularly on the oil stuff. This is front and center actionable intelligence for people like him, because the recovery is going to come, and it's going to come at some point. And if we follow it up with propaganda based on faulty science, on another lie, we can severely limit the economic capability and viability of one of the greatest nations on the planet. And God is telling you in no uncertain terms that this itself is an event of national importance. And it's interesting because what the pandemic didn't do to take down America, this could economically take down America, because again, it's the end of the pandemic, which is what the symbol means. We see America rising again in its commercial viability. A missile doesn't harm a plane. It blows up a plane.
Yeah,
It ends
exactly.
the
And this
plane's
missile
life.
is enormous. So
Right. And it kills everybody on board. Like, it's not like a ding on the engine block. Like, this is a fatal blow. And so I feel like it's a policy dream particularly for government and economic policy, related to how we move forward. And it's a warning to not move forward based on fear and to not move forward based on political agenda that has to do with fear. If we can come together as a nation, which I know a lot of us would love to see this across the aisles, and we could say, come and let us reason together. And let's stop with the pseudoscience, and let's stop with the fear and propaganda, and let's stop with the Operation Mockingbird, down people's throats with the media at every moment to try to control how people act in this country, who goes to church, what businesses are open, what businesses are closed, who becomes billionaires and who doesn't. If we could come together and say, for the good of the country, what are the decisions we need to make, and we reason together, I think we can avoid the hit. I think that this is a hit that can be avoided, but it's going to cause, and it's at a moment where people are going to not want to be as vigilant as they've been, because we've been hyper vigilant and we're ready to go back to can't we just breathe easy? And this is a time when, in particular, legislators and people in governmental policy positions need to guard against this green missile. And they need to guard against it for their states, for their cities, for their localities, and on a national scale. And there may even need to be some political movements that are generated because of this warning. I believe it's that serious.
Let me read something to you, John, that had come to me just a couple minutes ago. And it's a friend of ours. This just happened. Wow. Parents in Vail, Arizona just took over the school board, all according to the rules, voted in a whole new board, and immediately removed the mask mandate. Democracy in action, just amazing. People are getting fed up with what you have just spoken about and covering from the COVID, is that how much of it is Fauci and Gates and all the other that we heard at the conference, and people in this country, American patriots, according to what is lawful and legal, and not the way the others do it, through tearing and destruction, are coming forward and saying, we've had enough. We need to go back to the way it was before all of this charade and some of the things happened. So that just came to me as you were, right before you started speaking. So it kind of confirms what you're saying about the pandemic.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think it's what you're saying is a piece of actionable intelligence on the end of this stream. And it's, it's funny because I said, and God will tell people different things. I said governmental and legislative people in particular. But what you're saying is, the grassroots can have a play in the outcome of the stream as well. And I believe that we're at that time. We're at that time where, and again, like you guys, I served this country for 11 years. I was in the military. There was a time that I 100% unequivocally trusted the United States government to guide my life, to tell me you're going to go to war and to pay a price for being in those situations. And now I don't trust the government 100% anymore. And in particular, it really depends on which party is in charge. And when we see what's happening with the fear and the propaganda and all of that, it's difficult to be able to trust. And I think there's been so many dreams related to George Washington, related to the Revolutionary War, Trenton and Concord, the Angels at Valley Forge, Dutch Sheets had a dream. There were multiple, probably 7 or 8 dreams where we've seen reference to basically a Revolutionary War type of scenario. And what I believe that means is that there is a new day in America, that God is bringing a new beginning. And it's when people, average people, we're talking pastors, we're talking farmers, back in the days of the Revolutionary War, said, we are going to fight on behalf of this country. And there were a third of the population that stayed loyal to the crown. And there was a third of the population that took up arms and joined, the Revolutionary Army. And then there was a third of the population that remained completely neutral and just kind of stayed out of it. And so we won what is considered arguably the most incredible war against the most major superpower of our day. And we were basically a country startup fighting with 1/3 of our people, with another third fighting against us. And so I believe that the actions of the people, even the audit that they're working on right now in Arizona,
Yeah.
and the actions of the people. I just got a text message that Project Veritas just exposed that CNN will be pushing climate change. And, it's up to us to stop this once COVID ends. There's one of the ways that people in a dictatorial capacity and a tyrannical capacity try to rule over free people is with fear and propaganda. And if you have not figured out that is happening in a massive, pervasive, unequivocal, we're not even trying to hide it anymore in the United States. If you don't know that, go back to sleep and we'll wake you up when we've restored our country, frankly. But I think most of us know, most of us see, but most of us see to a certain extent. And what we need to do is when God is showing us something like this incredible dream, is we need to lean in. When God started showing me things in dreams, I started turning off the news. And the only reason I would turn on the news was to verify whether the stuff in the dream was what the news was reporting, because God would tell us not what's happening, but here's what the news is reporting. God creates a distinction in dreams between what the news is saying and what is reality. And if there are certain things that are going on that the average person doesn't have the bandwidth to follow, like what's happening in climate change and economic policy in Washington, God will begin to tell you those secrets in dreams and allow people like Amanda to share them on shows so people can become woke. God uses dreams all the time to wake people up. And I believe that this is by the symbols in the dream. I feel like what this is saying is the missile could be a greater threat than what came before.
Mhm.
Like if you think of all the hell that we have been through in the last year in this country, that is a big, big statement. And I know there's a lot of people, my own family included, that get very, very emotional when we have discussions about climate change. But what I'm saying is we need to have real scientific discussions across the aisle, and we need to have policy that makes sense. And if in the process of coming back from a very recessed economic place, we want to immediately burden the country with solving the carbon index of the world, it's absolute utter stupidity that could cost lives and economic viability of the nation. And if this nation falls, God forbid, as the economically viable superpower in the world, it completely changes the ability in the environment to spread the gospel, for freedom and liberty to exist. Like, we can't even begin to fathom the amount of the price that would be paid in loss of life if America loses its economic superpower viability in the next 10 years.
John, this is how it works when we're together as a group. I am to release a vision that I've held on for a while. It's called the resurrection of the eagle. And part of it is that God says, you've wounded the eagle, but I'm about to resurrect the eagle. But in part of that, what you just mentioned, and I have it, is there were people that the Lord showed me in some of the Civil War battles. You said 1/3 were for still the crown, a third were patriots, and a third watched. And he was telling me it's either a time to be on my side or not. But he showed me in one of those battles, people had in Gettysburg one of those lawn chairs, and they had picnic baskets, and they were observing on a hill, looking down into this battle as though it was theater for them. They didn't care. They were just being entertained. And these people had wealth. And then suddenly the war became active to them because up through that mountain they were sitting on, this war broke out and they began to flee. And the Lord was saying, you've been comfortable. You've been eating out of your picnic basket. You're sitting in a lawn chair with your straw hat on, watching this. This is now coming to your doorstep. And that's part of it that I've not shared that vision yet. And yet you just mentioned the third. And that's the part that the Lord is saying is you've observed, a lot of you have observed long enough and think that you can stay out of it. It's not going to happen. So it's interesting how the Holy Spirit works those things while we're talking, and you and I, we haven't talked about those things yet.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. And I think from now till the end of the year, I just think it's going to be like a roller coaster ride from now till the end of the year with all of this, where you're going to see some major, it's, with a roller coaster ride, you go up to the peak and then it, and then it goes tick, tick, tick. That's what it almost feels like, because I'm watching it with Israel too. That's why I'm saying this, where Israel being on the brink, and that affects the world. And so it's almost like it's, you know what I mean? It's climbing to the peak, and then you see the drop. So I'm watching, all of this happen, and, this dream has been in the back of my mind since I had it with American Airlines and the missile. And I'm watching similar things happen in Israel also at the same time, because when the United States is perceived as weak, it's like everyone wants to jump on Israel.
Yep.
When they don't think the United States is going to do anything about it. But, we serve a big God who loves Israel, and they have much more trouble on their hands than the United States if they go after Israel. But it's just interesting. I'm saying that because I'm watching this happen, because the United States and Israel are connected, where you see, if the United States is strong, you see enemies back off. If the United States is perceived as weak, you see enemies advance.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely true.